All right, call to order.
Pledge allegiance to the flag, of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mr. Bordenaro. Here. Fernandez.
Here.
Mr. Grady.
Here.
Ms. McNair.
Here.
Mr. Miller. Mr. Paradis.
Here.
Quorum.
Okay, audience of citizens, I don't know if there's anybody online or anybody in the. I don't think so, huh? Kev? Any? Okay. All right, so, well, we got the, police chief here and deputy, might as well start with presentation you provided.
Good evening.
Hi, how
How
are
are
you?
you? Almost there, right?
Oh,
End
yeah.
of the line. Thank you for having us back. We understand there's some questions and we would much rather answer your questions than leave them unanswered. So some of the material was passed out by Lieutenant Solik, who spent the next day or so analyzing overtime and can answer questions related to that. And then there was two other questions related to the analysis of staffing needs, and the chief's going to address that. So Lieutenant, I think we'll start.
I handed out two items today. One is the stapled packet, and that is a year by year fiscal year accounting, just broken down by month for all of our overtime costs. To go along with that, I correlated each month with the amount of sworn personnel we had first day of that month. That is actual sworn people that are working, not in field training, not in the academy. People that are actually able to work. I wasn't able to dive a little bit deeper, which could have been done. Take out people that are out on sick leave and workers' comp and that thing, that could affect things as well. The other single page that I handed out is just our updated organizational chart. In there is the vacancies that are the positions that should be filled with our people on FTO and the recruits that are in the academy. That shows where all of our people are currently allocated, or we want them allocated if we get them all fully trained. So I know you were asked for a weekly breakdown. I think the monthly will probably answer most of your questions. And if I direct you to the last page, I added on there, I was only able to get dispatch overtime for the last 2 years because our scheduling software, we didn't have dispatchers in our scheduling software prior to that. But it gives you a snapshot of what their yearly overtime cost is. The current fiscal year, which is that 24-25, that's only through February 28th. And that does include $41,000 of overtime that was related to the renovation that we did not anticipate this year. So that's a little bit higher than what would normally be expected. If you have questions about how, if you want to look through how our numbers affect that overtime, you can kind of go through year by year. Tim.
Just a quick question. This says the number of sworn personnel operational. These are boots on the ground in the field.
Other than if someone was out on extended sick leave, they're not pulled out of that. But
Right,
these
but
are
I'm saying
people that are
this is-
trained and able to act as law enforcement officers.
Who would not be included in this? I mean, chief, deputy chief, are they included in?
No, the chief and deputy chief are included in that.
Okay,
The only ones that are not are people that are in field training or in the
Not sworn.
academy. Yeah.
okay.
You'll see the first 3 years, just to give a quick overview, the first 3 years were pretty stable with our number of how many people are sworn. And that's also through kind of our thick of the COVID years. Many people would think overtime would be higher during COVID, and we actually saw the opposite. Overtime was much lower. Activity in the community was much lower. Our employees went on less vacations. They called out sick much less. Kind of ironic, but they called out sick much less during COVID, other than those couple times when they had those instances. So it's kind of steady. And then you see the volatility start in fiscal year 22-23, where we lose numbers way down to about 35 sworn. And you see the last column is an average overtime hours per person for that month. So you'll see that average jump up to the 20s and then go over 20, which we didn't see before that. And
Okay.
that happens through 23, 24, and we just kind of got that number back to wraps this fiscal year. You see in August, we got it back down to about 15, which it seems like that is our kind of sweet operating spot, is the 15 hours per month per employee. At that rate is probably a normal overtime burn rate, not due to employee shortages.
So that's basically saying, the average guy works 4 to 5 hours a week overtime on a 4-week month, basically.
It's probably safe to say, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I've averaged out over
Yeah.
everything.
I kind of guessed that on my own calculation.
And one thing I want to point out is, so we understand how our staffing affects our overtime costs. We have many reasons of why overtime is created in the police department. It's not only staffing.
Sure.
So things that are not staffing dependent would be administrative overtime for, say, if the lieutenant is needed for some kind of extracurricular after their normal hours, or a sergeant, firearms sergeant needs to do a project. It's specific to someone who has a specific task. All right. And then casework. So officers get a case at the end of their shift. They stay after the shift for 1 or 2 hours. That wouldn't go away if we have more staffing. That's relative to casework. Same thing for MSARs, which is our fatal and serious crash call outs. Those are specialized trained people that get called out. Detective call outs, background investigations that sometimes need to be done outside normal work hours, court subpoenas for our officers, and periodic staff meetings. So these things are all things that we do in the normal course of business that would not be reduced by having more staffing. But the things that would be reduced, the overtime reasons are, we have officers that teach and dare, and if we have higher staffing levels, then those officers would be available to teach dare classes on their normal shifts, which sometimes they do. Wouldn't completely eliminate the need for overtime, but sometimes if there's no shifts that were above minimum, then we have to pay them overtime to teach those classes, or we'd have to cancel them, and we don't want to do that. Same thing for firearms training. Firearms training is something everyone needs. If we have more people, then it would cost less overtime to conduct all the firearms training. So school training, sick leave, any town events, union time, vacancies, vacation leave, and personal leave. They're all directly related to staffing levels.
So what percentage of, those like administrative and all that stuff, do you guess represents, what portion of overtime represents that versus regular overtime? Because I mean, what we're trying to really get at is, we're gonna add, we're gonna go to 46 and then 48. I mean, what is it, your overtime could go basically down to almost zero on a, operational standpoint, possibly, and you're always gonna have instances, but
Yeah. With how we operate, I mean, zero would be.
I understand. I'm just, yeah,
I don't want you to-
yeah,
don't want
I
you
hear
to
you. Yeah.
Get your hopes up, but.
No, I'm not, I'm not. I'm just trying to,
You see the largest reduction when we hit about 40, 41, 42 operational. And that's because that's when someone takes a vacation day, it doesn't create overtime,
gotcha.
because we have enough people in that span of control to cover 1 and sometimes 2, maybe even sometimes 3 people taking a personal day, a sick day, or a vacation day. When we're lower than that, 1 person takes a day off, it costs overtime. So we would reduce that number, but obviously not down to nothing.
No, I
Yeah.
didn't really mean to say that,
Is it safe to say, though, that the more officers that you have doesn't necessarily mean lower overtime?
It does, but not at a 1.
Right.
and
I mean, are we looking at
I
it?
don't have the data to support an analysis of how much it would reduce it.
Because even with the figures that you've shown us, it seems to me at least that even with the higher numbers in the fiscal year 24-25 year overtime is still per person just as high, if not higher.
So overtime is just the nature of the business. It's always going to be there.
So even if you had 60 officers, you'd still have overtime and you would still have, it's hard to say that it would go down.
It's hard to forecast how much it would go down.
I mean, the only thing I would,
This fiscal year, it did go down to about 15. If we take out October of this past year, that's inflated due to the fire.
Right.
So
We'll
if we
always
take
have-
that out, we're averaging about 15 per month, 15 hours per employee per month, which is much lower than we were in those years when we were short down to 36, 37 operationally. So when we look at, if you look at 3 bodies operationally, that's really 1 per patrol shift.
Right.
So 3 bodies is really 1.
And so that's not going to necessarily change the overtime need if something happens or,
Not when there's events, no. And you asked for kind of a breakdown of percentage. The stuff that's not staffing dependent is much less than the stuff that is staffing dependent. If I had to take a wild guess, I'd say 15-20% is non-staffing dependent. The rest is staffing dependent.
thank you.
I mean, just as an observation, it looks like if I look at the total OT this year, less the 45K due to the renovation, we're almost $100,000 less than we were last year at this time.
Yes. Last year was a boom year on many fronts, and there was other reasons outside of our staffing that played into that. I know we've talked about it with the police commission. There was contractual things that came out of our last police contract, which the town actually requested all of our union employees to move to a reset date of July 1st instead of their anniversary date. And in order to facilitate that, they gave everyone whatever they had on the books for time, and they gave them a whole nother year's worth of time. So our employees had much more vacation time than they ever normally would. Now all that vacation time created overtime throughout the year. It costs a lot of money.
Okay, so, so you're authorized to have 46 officers, and then you're asking for 2 more in this budget. So, and you're still holding the overtime dollars that you had last year for this proposed budget. Would you reduce it a little if you're increasing your staff?
I would defer.
I mean, I guess you're increasing headcount.
Yeah, we see that would, because there's a trend for the reduction coming, and, do we know what that number is gonna be? Are we talking 50,000? I mean, if we're 100,000 less this year, and we had a couple things happen to us, the fire, the 41,000 for this bathroom thing was definitely not expected. Those are big numbers to us. So I would venture guess you're gonna see a reduction, 50,000 or more.
I would look back to, I pulled the actual overtime spent for the last 5 fiscal years. You go back to fiscal 20, we were at 500,000, then 519, 626. And those came up. I would say the optimal operating was in that fiscal year 22, 21, back to 20. That's where we would like to be. If you go back 5 years to equate that to dollars now, you've got to add 3.
You gotta have escalation,
per
yeah.
year, compounded every
Yeah,
time.
I mean,
You know,
last year was
Probably at least 600.
last year was unusual, I think, for you guys. in terms of- Yeah, yeah.
From the end of the fiscal year, the year before into last year too. Which, that was 8 people going to academy. We hired more, but 8 made it through the academies and ended up being in the field.
Yeah, we've hired 14 in the since January 2023 that we still have on the books. That was to get us to 46 that we've hired right now. It was a lot of work to get everyone in the door, but that was the goal that we set with the police commission years ago to get this department staffed to where it needs to be. And, we're ready to take that next step forward, whether it's 2 steps or 1 step.
Okay, so we're gonna make a budget adjustment this evening, so you wanna use 50, 100, 75, it's your call, chief.
You want me to make that decision?
Kevin, what do you
I
think?
can make it, I could say 100, because but no, I'd rather have you make it. understand, understand.
You guys can always come back. I mean, we've made adjustments before throughout the year. I'm just looking at, I know you have some more guys coming online.
Yep.
So that should theoretically pull for each man a minimum of 40 hours out of this overtime a month. I mean, a week. So, I mean, that should help along the lines of that.
$50,000, I would say.
Okay,
It could be more down the road, but then.
yeah,
say-
okay. No, I'm not trying to pressure you. Well, I mean, I think your staffing is gonna be in place pretty good next year too, or, you know. You got people coming off training, you know, and,
Look at this, a couple different things,
Yeah.
like what we gave you last week too, about looking for more grants.
right,
And alternate ways to fund some of these things, can I get from the asset forfeiture funds that we can get a share of and all?
We're also looking in the year ahead, when we are asking for 2 more officers now, if we get 2 or if we get 1, that's really, we're gonna have to hire because we've identified several employees that are most likely going to leave in this upcoming year. So we have to replace them as well as hire for any new hires. So we might be hiring 3 or 4, depending on what you guys.
I mean, the biggest, you know, risk is, like you said, people leaving. Because if you look at, your overtime and you look at the analysis that was presented to us, which excluded overtime, you don't really need 50 if you incorporate some overtime in that model. That model didn't include any overtime at all. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I just added 5 hours a week and, you know, to your calculations. And it said your requirement would go to 44 as opposed to 50. All I did was add 5 hours a week. I'm not saying that's right, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, based on the model itself, it doesn't consider any overtime at all. I mean, you're gonna have some overtime, but, you know, so.
And now you guys have one candidate, I guess, from the last, police commission meeting that's pretty much ready to go.
Fine.
He's been hired.
Okay.
Really?
Oh, well.
He was hired by Southington a week after.
Is that because you didn't have a, you didn't have a official requirement?
Didn't have a spot open, so he just took the job that he was offered. You know, if it's a good candidate, they do not last long.
No.
So, I mean, some people specifically would really like to come to towns like the town of Berlin. Now that we have a pension, we're more marketable, our salaries are marketable, and so we are getting towards the top of people's lists where they want to work in a community like Berlin versus some other departments. And so that has helped us within the last year or so. In the last couple batches we got were great candidates, and we're very happy about it. So that's a good thing for us. So hopefully that continues. And if more positions become available, we will start on those immediately.
You know, we don't want to hire a candidate that's not going to make it. We had it at the very beginning. We were not getting the top candidates. We were getting middle or lower candidates making it through to the process. And then what happens is they go to the academy, they might struggle through the academy, then they become FTOs, they don't make it to FTO. We just lost 100,000 plus. Well, the salary plus training costs.
Yeah.
So we only want to try and bring the best in. But the good thing is that the culture has changed. And I know there's no way to put price tag on culture, but it's important when we're marketing. Why do you want to be a Berlin officer versus a New Britain officer or a Newington officer? You know, and that's important to us because now we're seeing more candidates that are good. That's a big thing for
Okay.
hiring.
Just a comment, Dave stopped over my house today, different reason, but, I just talked briefly and he mentioned the one that went to Southington and he had lost what he thought was a stellar candidate. And I mentioned to him, it's like, you know, when that happens, don't be afraid to come here. Don't be afraid to go to the town council and say, hey, here's this guy or woman, you know, it's like, I know our position's not for another 4 months or 5 months or you know you're gonna have a vacancy coming up. We can talk about that and do something, you know, that makes sense instead of losing an awesome candidate. At least that's my take on that.
I agree 100%.
We've done that in the past, I think, yeah.
The town does have a fund that people rely on. For instance, you know that a position is going to be available in a month or so. The town does have some funding to hire people ahead of time. So we do know that if we were.
But I mean, the town council has the latitude and there is funds elsewhere other than that fund you're mentioning that things can be done. I mean, these are sort of unique hires regard to, you know, a very specialized candidate that you're looking at. It's so.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you for putting this together. I know it took a little time to put together. Is there something else that,
Did you want I just want to say about, I gave you the yellow highlight.
Okay.
So, Lieutenant Martin's in Salt Lake City. So I talked to him last night. Because I had to have him explain to me exactly how the staffing thing, the numbers on the questions that I was given yesterday. What's highlighted is what he sent to me this morning in an email. That's his comments. And then what I put underneath was, well, what is the backup that you would get to that? So there's a couple of formula type setups there that we can use for the workforce analysis. And if you recall, last week, we gave you two different analyses. One was the NFA and the other one, I forget what the other one was called now. I don't have the book in front of me, but you might have it. So, and they both came up with the same number.
okay,
And that's why we were pretty sure. Now, listen, 3.5 years ago, when I was in the process to be chief here and all the other chief candidates, the police commission told us, hey, can you get us to 50? At a time when nobody wants to be a cop in Connecticut, right after police accountability comes on board, I said, oh yeah, I can get us to 50. And I expected it to be a little bit easier, but it really hasn't been easier. But the town has done tremendous things like this pension, the contract they got right after the pension. I was stunned at what they were able to get for a contract. Also, when I talk about changing culture, that was important. We need to have our officers invested in the community, not just come here for 2-3 years and go someplace else. And interestingly today, one of our former officers is a detective in Southington. He's been there 6 years. He was in the building today doing a training program with some of our other detectives about some cyber stuff. And I never met him until today. And he's talking to me. And he says to me, if I knew the department was going in this direction, I would still be here.
Hmm.
And he was a 4-year vet before he left here. And that cost, you know, because when you're at that 38 number, that's a tough number for us. So the staffing thing, Martin's comments, I think they're pretty easy to read. And I told him, you know, I'm gonna write up the, how you get to that, his statement there. But
yeah, when you guys added the three, so it's 3 officers for attrition and then 4 for turnover, I wasn't understanding how that, it just was numbers on there, it doesn't
yeah,
tell
no,
me what the 7 extra bodies were for, you know?
Yeah.
So,
you know what it is, when you do this stuff, like when he was doing the report, he
Yeah.
explained to me, he explains to me, I understood. Then we
Yeah.
come to the meeting and it's like, well, you should understand this, but then even today, I changed it twice because I actually had his comments behind the methodology. And I said, you know what, I'm reading it right before I come up. I said, if I'm confused, and I wrote that with his comments, you're gonna be really confused. So the methodology, if you want to see how the backup is, it's underneath.
thank you,
But his comments are what's highlighted.
thank you, appreciate it, thank you. Well, I appreciate the work that you've done to get us the information. Appreciate it. I know you guys had to get to it quickly, so appreciate it. Thank you. Kevin, I think before we get into Board of Education, I think Jerry has a couple questions
I have a couple of questions
on other things, I guess.
for Ryan.
Okay,
Dealing with the priority listing that we got the other day. And I just want to relay to you some things that I guess I just learned about. 2 things, the electrical project at Timberland and the roof and window in the maintenance facility. And I was surprised, I was talking to Jerry Salvio, the director of the maintenance side up there, and he said no one has ever talked to him about this project of the roof and the windows. And it sort of shocked me that the guy whose department is in the building has never even been consulted about a $200,000 project. And when he said he was surprised when he saw it on the agenda the other week. And he asked me, has anyone ever considered the fact that we're putting maybe good money after, into something that really doesn't have life to it? Have we considered, the fact that maybe that should be demolished and we should be starting all over instead of putting $200,000 into it? And I couldn't answer the question. I said I would bring the question to you to see, has anyone talked about it? Because he says, even though, you're gonna give us a new roof and take care of the mold that's in the ceiling, and new windows, when it rains, the building still gets flooded because the grading of the land, forces the water into the maintenance building itself.
That's interesting you bring that up, because I had actually mentioned that to one of the people on the building commission.
Okay,
And their thought was, why are you spending $200,000 to fix that dump? We could knock it down and put a steel building up for half the price.
that's exactly what they said to me today.
Yeah, which was why.
Not for half the price, but,
Well-
because you'd make it probably bigger to handle the carts and.
Yeah,
some of the other stuff.
replacement for replacement, you're looking.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why I said the town council has started this thing now where everything will go through public building. There's a classic example.
So this has gone through public building already?
No, it was only, I mentioned it to him because we had it on our list.
Okay,
And I said, hey, that building, I drove up and looked at it, I
Yeah.
do that all the time, and the place is a dump.
Yeah.
And I said to Don in public building, I says, hey, this thing's, and he goes, why would you fix that? He said, well, knock it down and put up a steel building. So,
so, I don't know, it's just, it was something that we put on the list as a priority 2 item to fund. I'm just,
that'll
sort of
probably
having
go to
second
town
thoughts
council
about
and get
it.
sent to them.
well, yeah, I would hope it would.
Right,
You
exactly.
know, but at that point, it's already appropriated. We'd have to go through and unappropriate it and all that business, right? If PBC said they didn't, didn't make any sense.
So the ratings were based off of our meeting with staff members the other day and top managers, and so in talks with facilities, that's where that had come from as far as was concerned. I mean, you bring up a good point. Could we not, are there alternative ways to look at that? We can back to you on that. I mean,
Okay.
that,
Well, I want to bring it to you because I think it's something worth looking into. And like Tim says, maybe when it gets to PBC, they'll dig into that a little bit more. It's not really our place to be, saying what projects should be done or, I'm assuming that's all been vetted by the time it gets to us.
That's what my question would be too. The large vehicles and projects I would have thought were far enough down the line to have been discussed and vetted, and they're at the point that they're either going to go right to the Public Building Commission or they've already been and discussed. So I would imagine that all the other ones would have been similar.
First of all of these were reviewed with the council to say, should they move forward? To your question, Jerry, I would say in an ideal world, that's true. Part of the reason this is put on here is because this building has been looked at for several years. I mean, I've been here over 8 years and it was discussed long before that. Again, in an ideal world, we would knock it down, put up a building, but in an ideal world, we would knock down the clubhouse and put up a new clubhouse there that's been discussed for years as well. So part of this is also evaluating, based on the discussion for a number of years, what was the likelihood gaining traction on knocking down the building, redoing the grade and redoing all of that for the maintenance building versus addressing the issue that is here and finally trying to work on it. As far as the grade, there is actually a multi-year plan in the capital plan to redo basically every parking lot in town at some point. That's probably the one area is parking lots that we have not addressed. There's a lot of things that we haven't addressed to the level we would like, buildings, vehicles, roads, bridges, there's things we would like to do. But if you go back over the last several years, parking lots really have not been included in any of the final capital activities. However, Timberland Golf Course parking lot is on there, which would include the maintenance area, assuming everybody is familiar with the kind of driving in the driveway and going to the right behind those arborvitaes or whatever they are, and the building is back there. So as part of that, as part of redoing it, there would be an evaluation of the slope and just, I would think there would be a huge flooding improvement just by having asphalt there. And you drive up and there's just literally no asphalt. There's nowhere for it to run. It's just dirt. So in an ideal world, we would do that. But again, it's been on the capital plan for a number of years and keeps getting pushed out. So part of this was the intent to say, how do we address this in a way that would mitigate significant number of issues that are there in the building and outside for a reasonably affordable price. And I'll remind everybody, the police project, which is a significant project, started many years before I even got here, and we're just getting through part one right now. So again, in an ideal world, there's a lot of things we would do. This was to address water coming into the building. Parking lot is to address the flooding area, and to deal with that. To the specific part about if it's appropriated to this and that project doesn't move forward, that appropriation sits there, and then Council and Board of Finance would have the option of moving that money. Because this is reimbursement money, it would not be incremental to the taxpayers, and it would stay there until either the project moved forward or you and the council collectively decided we're going to move that to something else.
So it could end up being the first down payment on a new one if they decide to
Could be.
go forward.
It could be. Whatever the right answer is that the town is comfortable funding. And you're doing trade-offs every night. Every decision here is trade-offs on that. It's not an ideal world, but
Yeah. I think the only thing that, from what you said, I know everybody's got a job to do, but and it seems like the process went along and internally it was decided, oh, we'll never get the money for that, so let's just repair it. So we don't bring up the fact that this thing might be too far gone to do, and we should propose that there be a new building.
well, there were a couple of times when it was included on the list and it was pushed out because it was, the capital
building?
was pushed. Not a new building, the renovations to
Yeah.
this, yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking that, before we do these significant renovations to older buildings, you're new here, so you can, as these things, come up, I think we have to be taking the longer term view too on some of these things. And you're right, we need a new clubhouse, and they told me that people that work up there say that the electrical work is more important to do than the maintenance of the building. Because they said when they last did electrical work for the outside tent area, the electrical company said, you gotta be kidding. This thing is, there's nothing good about the service there now. I'm not gonna quote the actual words that they told me about the condition, but they seem to think that was a more important thing even. And that's why I just was wondering who was involved, and I was just a little surprised that they weren't, on the roof and window part of their building, that they weren't even consulted, and that they didn't even know it was coming up. That's all. Yeah, oh yeah, just something to,
Yeah. No, we'll take a look at
I
that.
guess the only thing with that list is that, the ones that are projects that require PBC, review or whatever, are all the ones on that list gone through PBC, or there's a chance that they're gonna go through PBC still?
They would still go through.
Okay, so that definition can change a little on those too, which could change the dollars up or down or whatever and so forth. So it's gonna be like a pool of money that's
Yeah.
gonna, shift here and there, you know what I mean?
It's a
So,
process.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is, and,
Well,
and to fund the amount of capital
Yeah.
this year, I think it was the goal to do as much as we can.
Yep. I agree.
With those funds, and so, yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, yeah, you could replace the building, for a higher cost,
Yeah, I have no idea what a new building costs, I mean, so Not like I can say, oh, yeah, gonna cost
Wh-
half of this or whatever.
I will say, though, that it is normal that the quote unquote tenants of a building aren't necessarily consulted when something like the roof that's being redone here. I work in the building every day, but nobody from facilities consulted me other than to say we're going to be replacing it, nor do I think they should. I mean, I might
When
give
it's
'em-
leaking on your desk.
well, there's a difference between saying it needs to be replaced, which we've known for years down there, versus consult me on what you're doing for the replacement. Just like, thank God for everybody, the Public Works Director does not consult me when he's putting in a bridge. I mean, there's just sometimes our facilities folks do this
I
regularly
think
and
they do a great job, but I think, it just surprised me that there wasn't communication. The two groups.
So while we're on the subject of the windfall from the high school, I was thinking about, we had the 100,000 come back for the camera system. And then the money that came off from the flock system. What about at this point, moving the other two cruisers over to that $2.6 million?
you've used all the 2.6. We're actually taking like $252 from the money that was set aside in the construction account for audit, closeout audit. It's literally $252 over. It's all identified within that list.
I just don't think we're gonna end up with using all of that list when the time comes. I think we're gonna be, just like with this project here, when it goes to public building, this will be a 2027 project.
Well, that's okay though, because it won't lapse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if something comes in under, that money will be
Right, that money
reallocated. It
just
won't
goes
sit
to
there.
somewhere else.
Yeah, this is, if it's not used for where it's put, assuming of course that the council agrees on doing this all as well. If it's not used, then it sits there and we move it to a different project or different purchase, whatever's highest priority at that time.
Is there any, we also got, you guys can look at responses from the Board of Education on questions that I submitted and we got the choice, information you requested. I don't know if there's any questions, but, self-explanatory as far as I can see. Okay. All right, so,
Do you want to vote on the police before you get into the?
Yeah.
Okay.
Make a motion, we reduce the police overtime budget by $50,000.
second, discussion,
So that's going from 650 to
600,
600.
yes. Okay, those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so moved. Okay. The other thing that we talked about yesterday was whether we add one officer or two officers for the staffing. So we can have that conversation again, if you like, just,
Yeah, I think at this point, I'd be comfortable with going with one. That was part of why I wanted to move the cruiser money, but. It's one plus the part-time position.
right.
Plus the FOI person, yeah. Yeah. Which basically the overtime cost gonna fund that anyway, so.
Okay, so want to make a motion? Or any further discussion? Make a motion.
I make a motion that we add one additional officer to the police budget. 526.
You're making a motion to eliminate one out of the budget.
Eliminate one, yes, I'm sorry.
Second,
Second.
any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 And Chief, if we can always get back together, with respect to, if you see something that you got a star that, okay,
Tell the person comes up.
yeah, okay,
The problem is we're working on a yearly budget and we have more leeway after the budget's established if we find money to. Well, we did it last time. We went 44 and
Yeah.
45, 46.
Right.
And it was more a budgetary move than it was anything else.
Last time we kind of committed to two, but didn't
Yeah.
have the money.
you've been a superstar, then
See ya.
after the budgets are all settled, then.
Yeah.
we can look back.
Yeah.
We appreciate your time. and-
Thank you, thank you,
Definitely.
thank you. Okay. So I think we're done with the town and,
Now the easy one.
So just one thing as you look at this, so the increase now would be 1.01 mils. There's two tabs. So if you looked at the PDF I've sent, there's actually two different
right.
versions of this. It's because of the motor vehicle change and the council hasn't adopted it. So it's worth 0.12 mils. If the council does not adopt, it would be at 1.13 mil increase right now with everything being same.
What is this they're making again? Refresh me.
The depreciation schedule that the legislature originally adopted had 85% in the, after the first year and then trailed off. The legislature has given communities with the legislative body of the community making the decision that they can make that 90% value in that, after that first year instead of 85. So bumping things up 5%, which will bump the motor vehicle value and would add to your grand list about almost $10 million of value,
The 1.01 is based on the.
90%.
Next, when will that decision be made?
It is on the agenda for next Tuesday.
I'm pretty confident they'll vote for that.
That's why I've been focusing on showing you this, but I just wanted you guys to know as you're going through this, that as we look at this, if they choose not to, everything else being equal, it would take 0.12 mils more to cover the budget.
There's a little snag with the the legislation that was passed in Hartford. Can believe it, it does restart the assessment appeal process all over again. And so it is, so that's the snag that we found out about with the legislation. So we just finished the appeals process, I think, yesterday? And so this would, because of the new legislation, if the town adopts this, it would start an appeals process all over again. Or everything, because that's how it was worded.
The grand list has to be reproduced and certified, has to be signed by the assessor again and certified, notarized, I'm not sure the official word, from the town clerk, and then submitted to OPM again, basically redoing the process.
We're still working through this, but every town that I've talked to seems to be adopting this. We did talk with Jeff this afternoon as well, and so we're working through it. So we'll talk about that on Tuesday as well.
So I've got 4 of these sheets in my emails, and that's not one of them.
Well, you just took
Just
money
take the
out.
officer.
Oh,
You
You
okay.
ju-
So
That,
this-
that
so
affects,
I started with the one that said March 11th,
yes, that would be after last night's work.
March 11th, okay.
The first page you would have at the top would be the higher mill rate, and then the second or probably third page there. probably the
Okay.
second.
March
So it's
11th
the
had
lower
work.
one that we're dealing with.
That's the one we've been focused on, but I just want you guys to be aware that they're,
So it went from 1.08 to 1.01.
Yes.
because of the overtime and removing one police
I just want
officer.
to know which one to work with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Should feel comfortable using. Want to flip it? We can use the first tab. I mean, realistically, whatever we have here, you would add 0.12 to it. If the council doesn't adopt. I think unless you had something
No.
else to discuss, you're down
No.
to the Board of Ed question.
Yep.
Oh, I did question 215,000 just to make sure that we're working with the right information. It is considered a one-time expense. However, it is reasonable to expect, I believe this is K-2 or K-3 is the reading program, that given history, it is quite likely that the legislature, assuming this is successful, will come back at a point in time in the future, maybe extend that out through 5th grade. So it may repeat, not quite to the same level. But you're talking about really one-time expenses for, supplies, materials. Right, right,
So it's not a continuation.
right. So you're dealing with supplies, materials for this, like the books, the things that would be needed. So you talked last night about potentially doing that. We could put a supplies account, which doesn't exist today. We put a supplies account in 61, then transfer that to the Board of Ed so they'd have it to spend in 60 in their budget at the start of July, if that's what you choose to do. I just wanted to make sure we were talking the right thing, and it truly is a one-time cost. They
Okay.
confirm that it is.
I think that was our intention, so I'm okay with that.
Yep.
I'm okay with that, yeah.
Okay. All right, so, I guess we left off yesterday that,
Do we want to recap the amounts that we proposed or?
what, sure. Okay, so, Marul, you proposed 5%. Tim was at 3%. Denise was at 4.5%. I just put something, a presentation, I had 3.2%. Now, this is all inclusive of the $215,000, from what I understand. I mean, nobody said it didn't or didn't include it. You didn't say it. I mean, you didn't.
Yeah, we discussed it and then we agreed that later on in the meeting that we're gonna put
Yeah,
aside
but when
from the
you gave me
increase.
the percentage.
It had that increase when I give you the percentage.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, Jerry had 4.38% plus the 215K that equated to 4.79%. And then by the time we got to George, it was just, we were done, so.
That was after I
George,
said.
George, yeah. So George, yeah, so, one of the things I do appreciate, that you talk it through together and, I mean, it's always difficult, whatever, so, and, I had some time to sleep over also and just trying to, put all my thoughts together and, I look at it as a combination of what I see as historical performance and also what they need. So, my proposal is a 4% increase plus the $215,000 for the program.
Got it right here. Same calculation. Overall, it's a 4.4%, kind of brings us up to the staffing contractual obligation.
I mean, I will say that, I know when Jerry brought up the ECS and why, we need to compensate for that. I mean, if you look at the last 4 years, it's been the same number, 0 increase. And, I mean, you could look at it different ways, but is this year's increase because of, accumulation of what didn't happen the last 4 or 5 years? I don't know that. The other thing is, like you said, Jerry, cost per pupil. Different towns use different, contents. So,
Metrics,
I mean, we are,
Not on the cost per pupil, but on their tax rate and what's in.
well, I don't know what they use. I mean, is capital
No, so it's
included?
always.
Yeah, so, okay, all right. So, but, that doesn't take us anywhere. Yeah.
I did say
Yeah,
that
yeah.
we're doing good as
Yeah.
far as.
I mean, the other thing is, I just want to bring up this thing here, that shows the cost, per pupil. I only have one page. I just want to make a statement though, okay? The only reason why I use it is because years ago, okay, the Board of Education would present this, okay? And Berlin was like 4th or 5th, okay? The point is not where we were as much as if we were 4th or 5th, it's the point that we've risen, over the years, because I think, gave them sufficient budget. So it's not comparing to the other towns, but, well, it is a point in time, because it's all apples to apples, unless somebody changed how they do their cost per pupil. But we were like maybe 4th or 5th in the last 3 years. We've been on top, compared to these towns. That's all, just a comment there, that's all.
I think, from where we all started, I actually think that 4% would be a good compromise. I think it was a good idea cutting the 215 out, so we don't compound that, in future budgets. And I think, between what your numbers were and where we were, and, I looked at it again and, some of this stuff, you've made the point that they've been able to do with less than the contractual amount you know, in the past, and I think 4 is close enough to the 4.37.
I mean, the only thing that, still I struggle with is the whole referendum thing, you know what I mean? Small population comes out to vote, you know, and then you, I mean, you have a few people, you know, that come out. I'm struggling that, I don't know if I want to give an increase regardless of what the vote is. I mean, I know that from a mayor standpoint,
Oh, you mean if they turn?
Oh,
it down?
after the,
If they turn.
no, no, right, yeah.
oh, that-
Because it is an advisory, you know, in effect, it's advisory,
Yeah,
but,
we don't have.
yeah, that's my
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
You have done that in the past too.
Not really,
The
well,
board has actually submitted budgets back without making a change. If you believe, it's not frequent, but you have done it.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you believe the budget's right.
I know we've done it on the town side a couple times.
yeah. So what is the monetary value between the 4% and the 4.37? Give or take,
couple $100,000.
yeah, about 215,
What's
220,000.
that look like on the big board, Kevin? So,
If you,
Like Price is Right,
yeah,
With the 215, the overall number is 4.4, so that's the number, so like 207,000 or whatever.
if you were to put the 215, if you were to add that to the general government side, so it's in 61 and then moved, and then make it 4%, it just happened this way, you would be at 4%, both general government and Board of Ed, be exactly 4%
wow,
for all of them.
we meant to do
Obviously, the,
that. We meant to do that.
So,
and if you did that, assuming the motor vehicle change, you'd have a 0.58 mil increase, 1.92, 30.79. A $345,000 home value, that's a $140 tax increase.
I don't know who could complain.
Wow,
with that,
Yes, motor vehicles 3246, you're welcome.
okay,
that's a solid number.
So you'd have to vote on reducing Board of Ed and then adding general government for
okay.
putting the
Do you
215.
know the number?
$1,500,157 if you want to be specific.
Okay, I make the motion to reduce the Board of Ed budget by $1,500,457.
Second,
Second.
any more discussion? All in favor?
aye,
So moved.
Motion to add 215,000 to Department 61. What was their?
Supplies line.
Supplies line
Second,
in the town budget.
second,
Second.
any further discussion? Those in favor?
aye.
So moved. We got a plan.
Water control.
So the only thing now, I guess we have to fill in the lines if you want with what you actually want to send as the actual numbers to the annual
Okay.
budget hearing.
Okay,
Bigger chair.
Okay. Two, but I'll print it out later. Where are we here? Okay, 52 and the 54 million. Okay, send the budget amount to send to the general government side to whoever it is, town budget or town
Council,
budget
Yeah.
hearing, sorry. $52,334,907.
second,
Second.
any further discussion? Those in favor?
aye.
So moved.
Move the appropriation for the Board of Ed budget of $54,617,908. I'm sorry, $54,617,908 to the budget hearing.
Second,
Second.
further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
So moved, unanimous.
And are you comfortable sending the water control budget as originally submitted?
Yeah.
I'll just fill in the
Don't.
number then.
There's no concerns about that, right? There's concerns about the water? Yeah, I got you.
So I'd make a motion on that. Water control and
You can do that if you want as submitted,
Yeah.
and I'll fill in the
make
number.
a motion to approve the water control budget as submitted.
Second,
Second.
those in favor? Aye, so moved. Thank you. Well, I appreciate us working together and getting it done, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Good
you.
job, guys.
Well done, you guys were actually very
Very, very
cordial
well
about the
done.
whole
Second.
thing. It was good.
Monday,
All in favor to adjourn?
canceling Monday?
Yes.
Yes.
Unless you want to go to it.
Like, that's August.
I appreciate you guys' help too. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gotta be